I always thought family was the one bond you could truly count on. 27 years of life trusting my parents with everything, only to discover they had secretly created $93,000 of debt in my name. The warm memories of my childhood crumbled as I uncovered the truth. They had taken my identity, my credit, my future, all to fund my younger brother's golden boy lifestyle. I never imagined my own parents would betray me so deeply. Let me know where you are watching from. Hit the like and subscribe buttons to find out what action I took and how they reacted when I finally stood up for myself. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Seattle, I never thought my family story would take such a dark turn. My family consisted of 4 people: my father James, my mother Diane, myself, and my younger brother Nicholas, who is 5 years younger than me. We looked like the picture-perfect American family from the outside, living in a comfortable 3-bedroom house with a small backyard where we would have barbecues during summer weekends. During my early childhood years, our family dynamic was relatively normal. As the firstborn, I was raised to be responsible, hardworking, and conscientious. My parents seemed proud of me back then, especially when I brought home good grades or helped with chores around the house. I can still remember my dad teaching me how to manage money when I was just 10 years old. He would sit me down at the kitchen table and explain the importance of saving, being careful with expenses, and planning for the future. "Bradford," he would say, "being smart with money is one of the most important skills in life. Start saving early, and you will thank yourself later." Those lessons stuck with me, and I became known in the family as the responsible one, the saver, the planner. I worked hard through high school, maintaining a 3.8 GPA while working part-time jobs at the local grocery store and later at a coffee shop. My parents seemed supportive, telling relatives how proud they were of my work ethic. I can remember my mother bragging to her friends about how I was saving for college while other kids were spending money on video games and parties. Everything changed when Nicholas turned 13. My brother had shown promising athletic ability from a young age, but during his early teens he really began to excel in basketball. He was tall for his age, coordinated, and had natural talent that caught the attention of his coaches. What started as casual praise slowly transformed the entire dynamic of our family. I noticed the shift gradually. Family conversations at dinner began centering around Nicholas and his games. My parents started attending all his practices, tournaments, and matches while they had only made it to a handful of my academic competitions. I told myself it was normal that sports were more exciting to watch than debate tournaments or science fairs. But a small part of me felt the sting of being sidelined. By the time I graduated high school, the family resources were clearly being channeled in one direction. While I had to apply for scholarships and student loans to attend state university, my parents started investing heavily in Nicholas. They hired private coaches, bought expensive equipment, and enrolled him in elite basketball camps across the country. I remember overhearing my father talking about investing in Nicholas's future, as if my brother was some sort of stock option rather than a teenager who still struggled with basic algebra. I accepted my situation and focused on building my own path. Throughout college, I worked 30 hours a week while maintaining a full course load. I graduated with a degree in business administration and found a decent entry-level position at a marketing firm. By 26, I was making a respectable $65,000 a year, had managed to pay off most of my student loans, and was starting to think about buying my first home. That is when my carefully constructed adult life came crashing down around me. It started innocently enough. I scheduled a meeting with a mortgage advisor to discuss my options for home ownership. She seemed optimistic during our initial conversation, praising my steady employment history and income. "Let us just run a credit check to see what kind of rates we can get for you," she said with a friendly smile. 2 days later, her demeanor had completely changed. "I am sorry, Mr. Davis," she said, her voice noticeably cooler, "but there seems to be a problem with your credit report. You have several outstanding loans totaling over $90,000. Your debt-to-income ratio is much too high for us to approve a mortgage at this time." I sat in stunned silence, certain there had been a mistake. "That cannot be right," I finally managed to say. "I only have about $8,000 left in student loans. There must be an error." She slid the credit report across the desk, and I felt my stomach drop as I scanned the document. There they were in black and white: personal loans, credit cards, and even an auto loan, all in my name, totaling $93,000. The oldest dated back to when I had just turned 18, and the most recent was from only 6 months ago. My hands started shaking as I stared at the paper. How could this be possible? I had never applied for these loans. I had never seen this money. I had never signed these documents. Yet somehow I was legally responsible for nearly $100,000 of debt that I knew nothing about. I left the mortgage office in a daze, my dreams of homeownership shattered, replaced by a growing sense of dread and confusion. That night I could barely sleep as questions raced through my mind. Was this identity theft? Had someone stolen my information? Or was there something even more disturbing at play? The dates of the loans kept nagging at me. The first one was taken out just weeks after my 18th birthday, when I was still living at home before leaving for college. Could it be possible that someone close to me was responsible? The thought seemed too horrible to consider. But as the sun rose after a sleepless night, I knew I needed answers, no matter how painful they might be. The next morning I called in sick to work and began my investigation. First I requested detailed copies of all the fraudulent accounts from the credit bureaus. Then I started calling each lender requesting copies of the original loan applications and any supporting documentation. Most representatives were sympathetic, but explained it would take time to process my requests. One credit card company, however, was able to email me scanned copies of my application immediately. When I opened the document, my blood ran cold. There was my name, my social security number, and at the bottom my signature. Except it was not my signature. Someone had clearly tried to copy my handwriting, but the differences were obvious to me. The loops were too wide, the strokes too hesitant. This was a forgery, but who would have access to all my personal information and be able to practice forging my signature? The horrible suspicion growing in my mind was almost too painful to acknowledge. But the evidence was pointing in one unmistakable direction. I needed to confront my parents. I drove to their house that evening, my stomach in knots, hoping against hope that there was some other explanation. When I arrived, they greeted me with their usual warmth, offering dinner and asking about my job. It made what I had to do even more difficult. I need to talk to you both about something important, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I tried to get pre-approved for a mortgage yesterday and found out that I have $93,000 of debt in my name that I never took out. I watched their faces carefully as I spoke. My father's expression hardened almost imperceptibly, while my mother suddenly became very interested in straightening the placemats on the dining table. Neither met my eyes. I have copies of loans and credit cards that I never applied for, I continued. Some of them dating back to when I was 18 and still living here. Do either of you know anything about this? The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, my father cleared his throat. Bradford, you were always so busy with school and work. There were some papers we needed you to sign for family expenses. You must have forgotten. His explanation was so absurd that for a moment I was speechless. Forgotten about $93,000, papers that I supposedly signed but never saw the money from. That makes no sense. My mother jumped in. You have always been so blessed, Bradford. You got scholarships, you had opportunities. Nicholas needed extra support to develop his talent. We did what any parents would do. The reality of what they were saying hit me like a physical blow. They had not even bothered to deny it. They had stolen my identity, ruined my credit, and saddled me with massive debt, and they were acting as if it was somehow my fault, my responsibility. You forged my signature. I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. We did not think of it that way, my father said defensively. We were just helping the family. Everything we did was for this family. For Nicholas, you mean, I corrected him? Not for me. You do not understand the competitive world of sports, my mother interjected. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to develop a potential professional athlete? The training, the equipment, the travel to tournaments. Nicholas needed these opportunities to succeed. As they continued to justify their actions, I felt like I was seeing my parents clearly for the first time. They had not made a mistake or a lapse in judgment. This was calculated, ongoing fraud that had continued for years, and they felt entitled to do it. Over the following weeks, I dug deeper. I discovered they had used the money for Nicholas's elite basketball academy tuition, which cost $30,000 annually. They had purchased a brand new SUV to transport the team and high-end basketball gear that cost thousands. They had funded trips to tournaments across the country, staying in nice hotels and dining at expensive restaurants. All of it charged to accounts in my name, while I worked multiple jobs just to afford basic college expenses. But the betrayal cut even deeper when I learned from the credit report that they had also taken out a car loan in my name for a vehicle. I had never driven a $30,000 Audi that my brother was now using at college. They had opened store credit cards and maxed them out buying designer clothes and electronics, all while I budgeted, carefully bought secondhand furniture, and limited myself to one modest vacation every 2 years. The stress began affecting every aspect of my life. I started having nightmares where I was drowning in piles of debt notices. I could not focus at work, and my performance suffered. My appetite disappeared, and I lost 15 pounds in a month. Friends commented on how tired I looked, but I was too ashamed to tell anyone what was happening. How do you explain that your own parents had betrayed you so completely? When I tried to discuss payment plans with my parents, they brushed me off, saying they would take care of it when they could. But further investigation revealed they were facing financial problems of their own. Years of living beyond their means had caught up with them. They had remortgaged their house twice, maxed out their own credit cards, and were barely staying afloat. They had no means to repay the debt they had created in my name, even if they had wanted to. The final revelation came when I received a notice about a missed payment on a credit card I never knew existed. When I called the company, they informed me the card had been opened just 3 months ago and already had a balance of $12,000. The fraud had not stopped. Even after I had confronted them, my parents were still opening new accounts in my name. I realized I needed to understand the full scope of what had happened, so I decided to talk to Nicholas directly. We had grown distant over the years, with him away at his prestigious basketball academy and later at college. I wondered how much he knew about where the money for his lifestyle was coming from. I met him at a coffee shop near his campus. At 22, Nicholas had grown into a tall, athletic young man with our father's confident bearing. But as we talked, I was surprised to discover he had no idea about the financial situation. "Wait, they took out loans in your name?" he asked, genuinely shocked. I had no idea, Bradford. I swear. What he told me next made my blood boil. Nicholas had actually quit the basketball team over a year ago, after suffering a knee injury that made him reassess his priorities. He had switched his major from sports management to computer science, and was no longer pursuing athletics at all. "I told Mom and Dad last year that I was done with basketball," he explained. "They seemed disappointed, but I thought they understood. They still send me money every month for training and equipment. I just assumed it was coming from their savings. I have been using it for tuition and regular expenses." So not only had my parents committed fraud using my identity, but they were continuing to funnel money to Nicholas under false pretenses, maintaining the illusion of the golden boy athlete even after he had moved on. It was as if they could not accept that their investment had not paid off. But it got worse. When I visited my parents' house again and insisted on seeing their financial records, threatening to go to the police if they refused, I discovered they had used some of the fraudulent loans for other purposes entirely. There were records of failed business ventures. My father had attempted gambling losses he had tried to recoup, and even luxury cruises they had taken, while telling me they could not afford to help with my college expenses. Everything came to a head during a family meeting I insisted on. Nicholas agreed to be there, and I brought all the evidence I had gathered. As I laid out the documents one by one on the dining room table, my parents' excuses and justifications grew increasingly desperate. "We always meant to pay it back," my mother said tearfully. "You were doing so well on your own," my father argued. "Nicholas needed the support more than you did." The breaking point came when they revealed they were on the verge of bankruptcy. The house was underwater, their retirement accounts depleted, and bill collectors were calling daily. And then, incredibly, they asked for my help. "We need you to co-sign for one more loan," my father said, as if he were asking to borrow a lawnmower, "just to get us back on our feet. We are family Bradford. Family helps family." I stared at them in disbelief. After everything they had done, they still saw me as nothing more than a means to an end, a clean credit score they could exploit. In that moment, something broke inside me. The dutiful son who had always tried to please his parents, who had accepted being second best, who had made excuses for their favoritism. That person disappeared. I left their house in a daze, ignoring their calls and texts over the following days. I sank into depression, barely able to get out of bed for work. The weight of the debt felt crushing, and part of me considered just accepting it as my burden to bear. After all, they were my parents. Was I really going to take action against them? My friend Anthony, who worked as a paralegal at a law firm, was the one who finally made me see clearly. After I finally broke down and told him everything, he was furious on my behalf. "This is not just unethical, Bradford, it is criminal," he said firmly. "This is identity theft and fraud, plain and simple. The fact that they are your parents does not give them the right to steal your future." He helped me understand that by not taking action, I was allowing myself to remain a victim. I would be sacrificing my own future, any chance at financial stability or home ownership, to cover for people who had shown no regard for my well-being. It was a harsh reality to face, but Anthony was right. I had to act not just for myself, but because enabling their behavior would only ensure it continued. I spent a sleepless night, weighing my options, torn between family loyalty and self-preservation. By morning, I had made my decision. I could no longer be complicit in my own financial destruction. It was time to take action. With Anthony's help, I developed a comprehensive plan to address the fraud and protect myself. First, we gathered all evidence: the credit reports, the forged signatures, bank statements showing where the money had gone, and written timelines of events. We documented everything meticulously, creating a paper trail that would stand up to scrutiny. Next, I filed a police report detailing the identity theft. This was one of the hardest things I have ever done, knowing I was potentially subjecting my own parents to criminal charges. The officer who took my statement was compassionate but direct. "Unfortunately, we see this kind of family financial fraud more often than you might think," she told me. "The fact that they are your parents does not make it any less illegal." Armed with the police report, I contacted every creditor and filed fraud claims, disputing the debts and providing evidence that the signatures were forged. I placed a freeze on my credit to prevent any new accounts from being opened, and I worked with the credit bureaus to begin the long process of repairing my credit score. When my parents learned what I had done, their reaction was explosive. My mother called me crying, saying I was tearing the family apart. My father was more direct, accusing me of betrayal and ingratitude. "After everything we have done for you," he said, his voice cold with anger, "this is how you repay us. By going to the police, your own parents." "You left me no choice," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "You stole my identity. You ruined my credit. You lied to me for years. What did you expect me to do?" "We expected you to understand what family means," he shot back. "Nicholas could have had a future in professional sports if he had just stuck with it. All that money, all that investment wasted because he gave up. And now you are giving up on us too." It was clear they still did not see the gravity of what they had done. In their minds, taking out fraudulent loans in my name was justified by their dreams for Nicholas, dreams that he himself had already abandoned. The weeks that followed were difficult beyond words. My parents told extended family members that I was the one who had wronged them, painting me as ungrateful and vindictive. Some relatives took their side without hearing mine, and the family split into factions. Holiday gatherings became impossible. I was excluded from family events, labeled as the troublemaker who had called the police on his own parents. Nicholas, however, stood by me. Once he understood the full extent of what our parents had done, he was horrified. "I never wanted any of this," he told me. "I never asked them to sacrifice your financial future for my basketball career. I am so sorry, Bradford." His support meant more than he could know during those dark days. The investigation progressed slowly. The credit card companies conducted their own fraud investigations, and one by one began to remove the fraudulent charges from my credit report. The larger loans took longer to resolve, but eventually most of the debt was legally recognized as fraudulent, and I was released from responsibility. My parents faced serious consequences. They were charged with identity theft, fraud, and forgery. Given their age and lack of prior criminal history, they received relatively lenient sentences: probation, community service, and mandatory financial counseling. They were also ordered to pay restitution, though their dire financial situation meant the payments would be minimal and stretched over many years. The legal victory was important, but the emotional wounds were slower to heal. I maintained my distance from my parents, focusing instead on rebuilding my life and my credit. I worked with a financial advisor to create a recovery plan, cutting expenses and taking on freelance projects to build up my savings again. 2 years passed. Slowly, my credit score began to recover. I was finally approved for a modest mortgage and purchased a small condo. I found a better job with a higher salary. Step by step, I reclaimed my financial independence and security. During this time, my relationship with Nicholas grew stronger. He graduated with his computer science degree and found a good job in tech. We spoke regularly, supporting each other through the family fracture. He had his own journey of coming to terms with the golden boy role he had been cast in and the pressure our parents had placed on him. Then last month, I received a letter from my parents. It was different from their previous communications, which had alternated between guilt trips and anger. This letter contained something I had never truly received from them: an apology. A real one, without justifications or excuses. They wrote about the soul-searching they had done, the therapy they had undergone as part of their sentencing. They acknowledged the tremendous harm they had caused, not just financially, but in betraying my trust. They expressed genuine remorse and asked for nothing in return, not even forgiveness, which they said they knew must be earned, not demanded. I read the letter many times, searching for the manipulation between the lines, the subtle blame shifting I had grown so accustomed to detecting. But it seemed finally that they were taking full responsibility for their actions. I have not yet decided how to respond or if a relationship with them is possible moving forward. Trust once shattered so completely is not easily rebuilt. But for the first time in years, I feel a small opening, a possibility that healing might someday occur. What I know for certain is that I will never regret taking action to protect myself. Standing up to my parents was not an act of revenge or anger, but an act of self-respect and survival. Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that save us. The journey from victim to advocate for my own well-being has transformed me. I have learned that loving someone does not mean enabling their destructive behaviors. I have discovered strength I never knew I possessed. And most importantly, I have redefined what family truly means: mutual respect, honesty, and genuine support, not exploitation disguised as love. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family loyalty and self-preservation? What boundaries have you had to establish with loved ones to protect yourself? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences and lessons learned the hard way. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to stand up for yourself, even against family. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that protecting your own future is never something you should feel guilty about.